The disarray, the terror, the mindless behavior that's created by this era of chaotic flavor. These capitalistic junkies, their underground connections, doctors and lawyers, they're blazing their obsessions. The urban fight, the ghetto upbringing, confliction and spite, it keeps your heads ringing. Ultra high class, elite no recession, they keep you mixed up, no room for progression. It's a diabolic scheme that they've put into function. These ultra high class, they work in conjunction. They keep you locked down. They're pushing your tin. They program your mind to live in sin. Conjured by the prophets, bringing in the dead. Captured by fear, it's all in your head. Systematic antics, mergers, and tactics, they're run hand in hand, along with crack hits. These psychoanalytical, white-collar criminals, they're flashing don't read with the subliminals. The lack of education, it brings on the hatred. Disarray and terror, it's one fucked up nation. Shackled to silence, they're bleeding us now. Corrosion of conformity, it keeps beating us down. What will it take for you to see it too? I hope you wake up to this film I made for you. Because they supersede the president, they won't be hesitant to reinvent the system or make your ass irrelevant. These genocidal maniacs, inside their brain is whacked. Nuclear weapons, elite, they keep them packed. The structure of the system, it keeps you in position. Sooner or later, it'll be out of commission. A new rendition, systematical failure. No more competition. No one can bail ya. Hi, my name is Shepard Ambellis. I'm the founder of the website Intellihub.com. I'm also a radio talk show host and a filmmaker. And oh, did I say I make beats? So filming the documentary was a crazy experience within itself, but I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad we learned what we learned. Meeting up with YouTuber Angry Catfish Briggs, author and researcher Marshall Masters, the legendary Jordan Maxwell, Jason Goodman with Crowdsource the Truth, my co-host Bethany Adani, Dr. Jerome Corsi, Dr. Richard Urso, and Dr. Jason Rand, author and researcher. So meeting up with all these people, traveling the US, talking to various people, seeing what's really going on, finding out about this COVID, Antifa, the asteroids, the natural disasters, space weather, it all adds up that something's going on. Making the film in general was a wonderful experience, but in other ways it was a living hell. I mean, myself and Aaron Cole were literally working 16 and 18-hour days, sometimes even more, to go to all these different interviews that we had to get done with all these experts, doctors, researchers, all these different people, plus end up in Louisville for the second day of the Breonna Taylor protest. So it was a whole power-packed trip wrapped up into an investigation that just never ended, and it lasted for about 3 weeks. In my experience working with Aaron Cole, host of The Cole Report, he's also a regular guest on my show, The Shepard Ambellis Show, nationally syndicated on iHeartRadio. Shameless plug, you know. Where are we headed now? We didn't quite make it there.
To Louisville.
Why? Because we didn't make it there?
This is a long ass fucking drive from New York, doing 2 interviews, working your ass off. But we're making it there this morning. See if there's anything left. Right now we're heading to Louisville, Kentucky. A couple hours ago, the grand jury said that only one officer was going to be indicted, and that was on 3 counts of wanton endangerment, which is basically he did not show discretion when he was discharging his weapon into that apartment, and that basically means they are not doing any indicting for the death of Breonna Taylor. So it looks like there's going to be a lot of outrage, a lot of looting, rioting, burning. The police have already been alerted. The city is already in a state of emergency, and there will probably be National Guard there on the scene. A curfew has also been put in place. There's been some videos of police already telling people to disperse, even though it was a mildly non-violent force of people there. But I'm believing that once the sun goes down, the freaks will come out.
So working with Aaron Cole was an experience within itself. We showed up. Are you fucking serious? Stupid motherfuckers. We're rolling into Louisville right now, and we're going to go investigate what's going on with the situation and as things are starting to develop in the Breonna Taylor case. Okay, sorry. Are you there now? Okay, I was getting a message and it said Louisville's under curfew right now, or they're getting ready to go under curfew, and it came on my phone like a text alert.
Oh yeah, one of those critical alert things.
Yeah. So working with Aaron Cole was a great experience, but he really came alive during night number 2 of the Louisville protest, the Breonna Taylor protest, and cops were shot just the day before. And it was a hectic situation, but we showed up on scene and I was quickly identified by a provocateur. I don't know if he was law enforcement, FBI, or some type of Black Lives Matter provocateur, but it definitely felt like some type of concerted operation.
There he is. The man. What's up, Shep?
How's it going?
Oh, dude.
Can you see me?
Yeah, dude. You are the fucking man. Don't get arrested, dude.
I know.
3 minutes.
So far they're telling me that the police kind of let me go because I'm pressed. So we're gonna see what happens. But I'm trying to find something that's going on too. Like I'm talking to police and they kind of like.
No, dude. Even this is good.
I'm trying to find out where to go. Yeah, I'm just trying to.
The guy I just talked to said go left.
Left, right here, you mean? Like right, basically? Yeah. Looks like there's some people gathering at this church down here. It definitely felt like some type of concerted operation, probably law enforcement, probably FBI. He singled me out and only me out. He knew we were in Telehub. He knew we had press credentials.
You want to be out here?
Yeah.
You want to be out here?
Yeah.
You want to go be out here?
Yeah.
I can get you taken out of here.
Who are you?
I can get you taken out of here if
Who
you want
are
to.
you?
So get on back on over there.
Don't
Go.
touch me.
Go.
Who are you?
Go.
Who are you?
Go.
Who are you?
Go.
Who are you?
Go.
What's your name?
Go.
What's your name?
Get the fuck away. That's who I am.
The reason that operative, I call him an operative, wanted us to leave is because we were streaming live. We were the only reporters streaming live for Intelihub.com and the Jason Goodman Crowdsource the Truth channel on YouTube. And it was a live report.
They shot first.
Yeah, right. What do you make of all this? Do you think this is going to last longer, or are they like?
Man, I think it's gonna be a long time because, for one, y'all see those weak ass charges.
Yeah.
He ain't even say nothing about Breonna Taylor. Didn't even mention her name.
Yeah.
How y'all doing? I didn't really mean it, but yeah.
She meant it.
I didn't.
And you're very.
Here's the National Guard. Are you National Guard? Yeah. One thing is for sure, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, these groups are working in conjunction not only with people like George Soros, possibly factions of the older Obama administration, and possibly even CIA and FBI factions, but we found out they are likely working with law enforcement. We witnessed a powwow, if you will, between Black Lives Matter and police, and the police totally disbanded themselves after this powwow. They made some sort of deal. They came to a pact. I don't know what's going on here, but it stinks, and it's it's not right. Something's going on. And that's another reason why we set out to do this investigation. There were some people that looked kind of like protesters. I heard they're gathering at this church, but we've been on such a run with this documentary and traveling. Like, for instance, we traveled. Well, we were doing your film shoot for the documentary yesterday morning, right? Well, we drove from your house into New Jersey, did another film shoot. Then we drove till 3 in the morning until we got within proximity of this, and we've been going all day doing stuff for the film. And now we're kind of trying to find our bearings. We just figured we'd go into it. I guess they're trying to block off this entrance. Now, when we were driving around earlier, we saw fully armored National Guard. I mean, they were wearing like like pretty heavy duty armor, maybe even like growing protection and stuff like that. And they had ARs out and about. They've put heavy dump trucks, like those big dump trucks you guys got in New York City, those super big ones. They're putting heavy dump trucks at the entrance of everywhere, going into the core part of the city, right? So if you're trying to enter like the downtown area, they got concrete roadblocks. It was a live report on Jason Goodman's YouTube channel for intelhub.com that we were offering live right there, and they didn't like that because now they could not fix their narrative to fit whatever they wanted to. And yes, I saw that same provocateur and the leader of the so-called Black Lives Matter protest working in conjunction with law enforcement, because they made a deal right there on the spot in a huddle. They all huddled together and they made a deal. And this was absolutely astonishing to watch.
You want to go down 4th Street?
Just go down 4th. Most people.
Go down 4th. Go down 4th Street. We're gonna make a left on the Broadway, and then we're gonna go down 6th.
Okay, so they're talking. It's like this guy's the leader of the protest or something. That fucking guy that was messing with me, and he's talking with police.
We will.
Okay, get back.
We got. Can I get everybody to get in the street? Can y'all back off? That cool?
But later on, I was met up by a bicyclist who rode down this dark street where this fire was burning. This tree was on fire, and I was there with Aaron Cole. And it was absolutely the strangest thing, because this guy had like a George Soros fist on his tactical vest. He had all this comm gear. It reminded me of when Jason Goodman was surrounded by those operatives at the protest in New York City, the Black Lives Matter protest, and they encircled him with their bicycles. They had the nice comm gear, nice communications equipment, tactical look. Billy Bob was how one of the men identified himself that was basically assaulting Jason Goodman at that point, and they profiled him as well.
What's the problem?
Can you not film people without their consent?
That's incorrect. You're in public. And by the way, you can't block the street without a police permit. You're intimidating me. Back up. Back up, dude, right now. You gotta back up. Back up. Do not advance on me. What's your plan? To tase people? I'm just telling you to stop advancing.
Nobody's doing anything. You're just disrupting a march. So let people go by.
So due to the fact that there's unrest, riots, there's Antifa, there's the Black Lives Matter, and the COVID, one of these experts that we went to talk to is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Now, Dr. Jerome Corsi is a well-known journalist. He always has very good information and very good insight onto what's really going on. So we showed up at Dr. Corsi's home in New Jersey to interview him, and what he told us is absolutely shocking.
This is Jerome Corsi, PhD in political science, and my current website is corsination.com. The roots of Antifa really go back into the 1930s in the Weimar Republic in Germany before World War II. And we came out of World War I with Germany very economically weakened. Germany had to pay massive reparations for World War I. We were going through a depression worldwide, and Germany was in economic turmoil. So when Hitler was rising, and Hitler and the Nazis were on the left, they were National Socialists, Their opponent at that time in the Weimar Republic were the communists, also on the left. Now, people need to understand the distinction here, because Antifa was the thug arm of the communists versus the brown shirts, who were the thug army in the streets of the Nazis.
Stop following me, man!
Hey, sorry. You just assaulted me, man. Oh, shut up. Why don't you get away from me, Billy Bob?
Now, Antifa in the streets were complete violent thugs. They had an idea that through the violence, in this Marxist idea, they were going to cause a uprising of people who were economically disadvantaged. The original Workers of the World Arise did not happen, and through the 30s, the communists shifted. They were going to use the economic misery of the Depression to radicalize it, create street violence, bring down the government, and create a communist state or a Nazi state.
All right, so we're headed down this back road. There's a dump truck blocking the road up here. And are we going toward the park? Yeah, so we're going toward the park.
Seattle's going hard for Louisville.
They're basically saying they're saying everyone else is going hard in the paint, and in Louisville it's not.
Nothing's happening out here. Nothing's happening in Louisville.
Do you think that's just
peace police? Fuck that shit.
Black Lives Matter began to arise during the Obama administration, and today it's a Maoist organization that's taking a knee to the black race, denouncing white privilege. This just radicalizes race. It doesn't get rid of race. It makes race the central theme of everything. We're all colonialists, we're all racists, and so therefore you see the Black Lives Matter in the streets burning and destroying cities because they're anarchists. They're the same. Antifa together with the Black Lives Matter is the same as Antifa being the thug element of the communists in the 1920s and 30s, because they are the anarchists who are the vanguard of the communist movement to produce this Maoist revolution. And today it's a cultural revolution because, like Mao, they want their entire agenda, which is, LGBT, it's gender definition, it's all these weird formulations of who you think you are and what your rights are. And with that push, what we have going on is a very intolerant, autocratic, they don't want the First Amendment, they don't want the Second Amendment. Antifa wants to just destroy. It has no positive building. This has been part of the limitations and difficulties with communism since it first came on the face of the earth. It produces death. Anybody who doesn't agree with it gets killed or sent to a thought reform camp or a gulag or gets put into a concentration camp. It ends up in massive death. And very few who are the vanguard or the leaders in a communist movement end up being extremely rich.
Well, this Antifa came out in Louisville night 2 and started snapping pictures of me and only me. So either Antifa is either a militarized arm of some George Soros funded back group, or they're literally working with law enforcement to profile various journalists and media and demonstrators.
In fact, I think the corporations funding Black Lives Matter and Antifa may have serious criminal liabilities, funding violence, funding death. The idea of defunding the police. Well, I mean, again, this goes back to the Weimar Republic, where defunding the police, the Nazis were happy to do, and so were the communists, because they wanted either Antifa, the communists, or the brown shirts and the Nazis to be the police. And they were the ones who were going to be the thugs in the street, and it was going to be their ideology that was enforced, not civil laws or, as we have, private property. Remember, they don't, especially the communists didn't believe in private property. And the Antifa is standing in front of you today in the streets of the United States shouting, "Get out of your house, we'll take this house, white privilege, white privilege." You're guilty simply by the fact of your race. As I say, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, intensify racial consciousness. They don't eliminate it. They radicalize it. They rub raw these tensions. They victimize in order to create violence and destruction. And they are revolutionary communist organizations by nature.
What I find interesting is how they singled me out, specifically knew I was coming to that. I don't know how they got their information ahead of time. And they really wanted us out there. They could not have that live stream going. And one guy was basically threatening me, and it turned into me saying something like, or
What? There's a lot of motherfuckers here. You're familiar with the phrase, fuck around and find out.
Well, meeting Jason Goodman was an experience within itself. He was pretty much like I thought he would be. I've known him for about 4 years now, something like that. And he's a great guy. I really like how he does his investigations. He's walking around New York, he's checking things out. But
hi, my name is Jason Goodman. I am the founder and host of Crowdsource the Truth. And welcome to New York City in the era of COVID-19. You could walk outside and there was nobody. I mean, you could stand in the middle of 7th Avenue and 42nd Street and not a car was around, not a person around. It was unique. I mean, it was, I've lived in New York City for 30 years. I was born in New York City, but, in Manhattan for 30 years, you've never seen anything like that. I mean, there have been snowstorms where there's, 3 feet of snow and the city's empty for a day, but then the next day there's just taxis trudging through the sludge and all that. For the city to be shut down in the way that it was literally for months, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it was just so unique. There was something cool about it in that you're in New York and it was like being in the movie, I Am Legend or something. But I mean, that's fine for 10 minutes when you start to realize, wow, everybody I know, every restaurant that I go to, every barber shop, every, independent computer store. I mean, well, Louis Rossman is still there, amazingly, but so many places have closed and aren't coming back. And I mean, we still haven't. Right now we're recording this, it's September 2020, and we still have not experienced the full fallout of this.
the thing that intrigued me most about his most recent investigations was when he showed up to the hospitals. He showed up actually to Elmhurst Hospital during peak COVID, and he basically found out they might have been holding a drill there. They weren't to capacity like they were saying.
So, in COVID-19, when the pandemic first started, somebody just mentioned to me in the live chat last night, or they said that I revealed that something was happening or whatever. It wasn't like I was like, hey, this is a scam and I'm going to go reveal it. I just figured, all right, there's a pandemic going on. Let me go over to the hospital and see what's going on there. And I figured there'd be ambulances coming in and out and people going crazy and crying in the lobby and waiting outside. And it was dead.
So, in fact, the hospitals were so dead that the nurses and doctors were going around. They were doing these special dances on that TikTok app from China. Where did they find the time for this? That's what we have to wonder.
And then the first hospital I went to was New York Presbyterian, which is the same hospital that you had that picture from the New York Post bringing dead Ep in on the gurney. So that was kind of interesting. But anyway, the thing that was strange about it was not only was there not a lot of activity, and people could still see that video, there were like 10 or 12 ambulances just parked there, and there was an EMT kind of like just tending to the equipment in the ambulance. I had a 5-minute conversation with the guy. This lack of urgency just was so strange to me, I started going to other hospitals.
When people went around in their own community and they were filming these hospitals and they found out that there was absolutely no one in them, that was an indicator to me that something bigger is going on.
And then right at that time, this was maybe March 2020, and right at that time, the New York Times had a big cover piece about this Dr. Colleen Smith. And actually, sorry, it was not a cover piece, it was a multimedia piece on the NewYorkTimes.com where there was a video of her. And it was so strange because, you know, I got a lot of doctors in my family, my father, my uncle, my cousin, all their friends. And I showed each of these people this video, and they could not believe that a doctor would be running a video camera in the ICU. I mean, every single doctor I showed it to said, wait, you're telling me a doctor recorded this? It was like the most bizarre thing they could imagine. And if you look at that video closely, the first patient that you see on the left side of the screen has their shoes on in the ICU, in the bed. That would never happen.
I even had on IntelliHub where they were using dummies because, you know, who has their shoes on in the ER? I mean, none of this looked normal. It all looked out of place.
So, I mean, is this the one time in history that a doctor chooses to run a video recorder in the ICU and a patient has their non-sterile shoes on in the ICU? Or was this part of a medical simulation? Dr. Colleen Smith, on her LinkedIn page, says she's a simulation expert. Elmhurst Hospital has a very large medical simulation department, and they have refused to answer any questions about this. They've refused to answer any questions about the hospital's policy on staff, COVID positive staff, what the policy is about them returning to work. Because, you know, when I started communicating with Dr. Smith, I asked her certain questions about the video. I asked her questions about the time she spent at the University of Chicago while Michelle Obama was the Dean of Students. I asked her if she had ever met fellow alum Bernadine Dorn, whether underground leader. She got very uncomfortable with these questions and blocked me on Twitter.
It appears like they might have even been using simulation dummies. I mean, this is crazy. If they actually did this to the American people and pulled it off, which I think they did. I mean, we've talked to doctors. We talked to Dr. Urso about this. This whole COVID map and how they're getting these numbers is essentially completely fake. It's a fraud. It's a farce. Again, it comes from the Johns Hopkins University.
So what does that mean? I don't know. We can't draw conclusions from that, but it's bizarre behavior. Doctors don't video record even the feet of patients in the ICU. They don't.
This Johns Hopkins University, they control the COVID case map, the COVID death map, if you will. Apparently, they're also controlling the trajectory of near-Earth, earthbound objects with NASA's Project DART. Now, this is the insanity behind this. So, are they using COVID as some kind of blanket op to roll out military deployments worldwide, put out field hospitals, 30,000 trauma surgeons? I mean, look, I talk to doctors left and right. None of them can understand why they would deploy over 30,000 trauma surgeons, military trauma surgeons, and they wouldn't deploy virologists. So none of this is adding up. None of it's making sense.
And it's interesting because, you know, Shepard, you came on the show and like out of nowhere, you were like, these lockdowns aren't going to stop. They're just going to keep them rolling. And I mean, you know, now here we are, September, and the news that's been coming out. First of all, it's sunny and beautiful out right now. Like, honestly, this is kind of the best time of the year in New York.
And I was one of the first people, I was probably the first one to say, look, these lockdowns, I was probably the first one to say that these lockdowns aren't going to end for a long time, years to come. And it looks like that's their plan. It looks like they've got it all pegged out through 2025. So there's some kind of ramp up, ramp down period. It's absolutely bizarre.
But they're already starting like, oh, COVID numbers shooting up. Everybody's going to be getting sick. And, you had introduced this idea that at the time seemed so off the wall that asteroids were in closer proximity to the Earth than ever before. And I kind of like these stories where they come out of somewhere that seems absolutely crazy. And when you first hear it, it's like, come on, this is wacko. Everybody was in the comments like, get this crackhead off the show. And but I've known you for a while, and I knew you wouldn't come out and say something if you didn't have good reason. And John Cullen went to the JPL or the NASA whatever webpage, and he started downloading all of their data. And I mean, this is their information. They're tracking these objects. And since you said that, there have been multiple near-Earth objects that have come closer than any ever recorded before, closer than the moon.
Well, John Cullen is in Thailand, so it's rather hard to communicate with him. One of the first times I had spoken with John Cullen was when we were investigating the Las Vegas shooting, and we actually were running analysis on the flight radar, and we were realizing that there were these helicopters present that never should have been, which is a whole entirely different subject. But that's how I first met John Cullen, and he became a good friend, but he's based out of Thailand. And so like, if I call him on the phone, it's a $200 phone call because I don't got international calling. I got my phone bill and I'm like, hello. That was like a 20-minute, $200 phone call. So now we do it over Skype, because who wants to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars just to talk on the phone or whatever.
Shepard.
Dude, how you been, man?
How are you, man?
Oh, good, man. Remember I told you I was filming that documentary, and we're going around and we're doing an investigation on what's going on with these lockdowns. You and I were talking about those meteors back in April, the Blue Kachina, Comet Atlas on Jason Goodman's show.
Sure.
Yeah, so I've been talking with people, and I don't know, I mean, space weather has been going off the charts. There is a lot of stuff going on, man, but what have you found out lately? I know we haven't talked in a little bit.
Well, I mean, if you go back to that show that we did together with Jason Goodman, we had you as a guest on Crowdsource the Truth, right? I do a show with him every Friday, and we were looking into the whole coronavirus thing, and Jason said, let's do a show and look into what's happening up in the skies, because they'd been locking everybody down, but there was kind of some strange air traffic activity.
Right.
So I came to the show prepared to talk about flight radar, because you and I had, we connected with flight radar 3 years ago on the Las Vegas shooting. And so I came prepared with a whole bunch of flight radar stuff, and you show up and you're talking about the Blue Kachina and Nibiru and Planet X and all that.
So, I mean, I don't know what that stuff does. People talk about, solar storms and how the energy from the sun. I mean, look, obviously I'm feeling the energy of the sun right now. It's hitting my face. It's having an effect on me. If I sit here too long, it's going to burn my skin. So why is it odd to think that energy from something in space is going to affect us here on Earth? And if something's coming close to the Earth that is not normally there, how do we know what it's doing? There was that thing that hit Nigeria. And I'm not saying that this is causing COVID-19 or whatever. I'm just saying the Earth and life and this entire ecosystem that we're on here, it's pretty complicated. And when you start to change parameters, I just don't think we understand what that will necessarily do.
Going to meet up with Jordan Maxwell in Arizona was an experience within itself. Jordan Maxwell's a great guy. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for over a decade. He's appeared on my radio shows. He's appeared in my last film, Shade the Motion Picture. And he's brilliant. So I went right to him to talk about astrology, the stars, space, the COVID, the fires in California. And is all of this a byproduct? Is COVID a blanket cover to roll out, place military around the world, and position to genuinely try and save your population in a disaster? Is that what it's all about? That's what we're leaning toward right now. Look, we've been in continuity of government in the United States since March. This is openly admitted, although the mainstream doesn't just go and taunt this type of information. General O'Shaughnessy already appeared on MSNBC's Morning Joe with Mika.
Hi, hello, this is Jordan Maxwell, and I am a researcher and an author and a lecturer and a teacher. I've traveled around the world for some 60 years, talking to audiences about what's coming on the inhabited earth. And most people have no idea in the world what I'm talking about, but now they're starting to listen. All of my life, I've been interested in all the secrets of the world that we are not aware of, and I have actively sought to understand dark secrets, only to discover now at 80 years old that the whole world is a dark secret. The entire earth itself is a dark secret. We humans are being led in our destiny to a world destruction. It is part of the old Communist Party's apparatus to destroy all governments of the world and bring about a United Nations. Isn't that going to be a wonderful new world order where all the nations will be united? It will all be slaves in a concentration camp. And that's what's coming for the whole earth. Well, we already are slaves. We are right now slaves in a concentration camp. But pretty soon it's going to be in your face, and you're going to see the governmental troops in the streets putting you into concentration camps, and it's going to be an incredible situation the Americans are not prepared for. And they have never had such a thing happen. And that's what's coming very soon now. We see it happening right now in our country, where people are going to prison and they're being taken off by the military and no one ever sees them again. Well, that's what's coming for America. An incredible communist world government for America.
Is this why it's coming from a top-down World Bank, World Health Organization level? See, is what we're finding out is we're getting these white papers. We're finding out that the World Bank was actually, there's an Internet Archive record of the World Bank actually selling and talking about COVID-19 test kits back in 2017. So this, if this is going on, this is concerning.
Now that the powers that guide our destiny are shutting our great country down. America has been purposely shut down, and we are going to be told what we can and can't do.
But what is this plan? Why is the World Bank financing this? Why is Fauci part of this? Why is there this independent board that, with the World Health Organization, with the World Bank, why is there this independent board that Fauci's on? Some of Bill Gates' people from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and others, even virologists out of Wuhan, China. What are they doing on this board of directors, and what's really going on, and what is COVID really? What does COVID really stand for, and what really is it?
The entire planet is going to be affected like New York was affected with 9/11. Well, whatever's coming, he said, is going to be hellacious. It's going to be incredible. And it's going to affect the whole earth.
The CDC came out and openly admitted that basically if you're testing positive, I mean, the tests are giving false positives anyway. We already knew that. The reason the test will test you positive for the coronavirus is if you have any antibodies from the common cold or another strain of coronavirus in your body, you will test positive. That's how they get the numbers up. So it's about the testing. They get the numbers up.
Everybody's going to feel it. Just like New York felt 9/11, the whole earth is going to feel October. So I don't know what that means. I have no idea. And I asked him what it meant. He said, all I know is it's going to affect business worldwide, all over the earth. All business is going to be heavily affected.
They scare the American people, and through scaring the American people about this, they keep them in total control.
Because it seems like the government is shutting down the whole damn world. Everybody is told to put on your mask, go home, and we hope you die. Keep your mouth shut. Don't talk to anybody. Don't get near anybody else, and keep your mask on and shut up and don't ask any questions. Why? Because they know something we don't know. You can bet on it.
Without further ado, here is your host, Shepard Ampellis.
All right, it's Thursday, September 24th. I hope everyone's has had a good week so far, but today we're going to have a special guest with us. Investigative journalist John Collin is joining us, and we're going to be talking all about these near-Earth objects, COVID, and what's currently going on with the whole state of the world.
Well, I mean, the story about COVID is so complex, and in a big way because of you. I mean, you broke probably the biggest aspect of the story that most of the public is not aware of, right? So the story, the narrative, the narrative story about coronavirus is, the public story. And then it turns out that there's two or more other stories behind the curtain, so to speak.
So a Department of the Interior whistleblower named Becca called into my radio talk show, and she said that, look, the government is preparing this entire alert system, and it's going out there diligently testing this system. She said it seems like overkill, and they appear to be bracing for something. She said that she saw department memos that basically stated, look, they're worried about climate change, abrupt climate change. Now, what abrupt climate change? What could be abrupt climate change? I don't know. An asteroid strike, the Yellowstone supervolcano blowing up, the California Long Valley caldera blowing its top. I don't know. Why do they got dust masks now and ventilators? They got huge stockpiles of ventilators. They got dust masks on every street corner. They were preparing and buying ventilators.
By all means, you broke the biggest global aspect of it that is so far from the coronavirus main narrative that people, were experiencing really dramatic cognitive dissonance when you first introduced it. But then what's happened over the last 6 months since you came on the show, you were on the show with me and Jason, I guess it was April the 3rd. And what we didn't realize at that time was that just 5 days earlier, your predictions had already come true. You were right, and you didn't even know it at the time. Like, you didn't realize how right you were.
That's blowing my mind even.
Yeah, I mean, you were on the show April 3rd.
This is a while ago now. This is 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And the comments that people made on the video are kind of funny because now, in retrospect, not only were you right, you were right in such a big way that it's somewhat dramatic and hard to believe the extent to which you were right. It's unprecedented.
The U.S. government was preparing for and buying ventilators ahead of COVID. Then when the COVID actually hit, when they said it hit, and there was lots of cases, they went ahead and increased production on these ventilators. They ordered GM to increase production on these ventilators. What are they going to use all these ventilators for? I mean, really. And so you've got Nancy Pelosi coming out, and she's talking about how we're in continuity of government, okay? So she's going to these continuity of government meetings, Nancy Pelosi is, and she let a little slip of the tongue happen in front of the press because she said something about Trump not wanting to leave the White House because he's going to occupy it. beyond the election. This is what she's actually worried about. The reason she's worried about this, it's not some plan that Trump came up with. Like when you think back on presidents, people have talked about this before. You know, Obama was going to stay in the White House, and so on. It's a conspiracy, but not this time. The thing is, this time, we're in actual continuity of government. The government is braced for something. They're buckled down, they're bunkered down.
What's been happening this year, the number of NEOs that we have seen that are sub 1 LD, meaning they're less than the distance of the Earth to the Moon.
Right.
LD is lunar distance, right?
Okay,
you know that.
right.
Yeah. So the ones I'm interested in are the ones that are sub 1 LD, meaning if they're less than the distance to the moon, they get my attention. If they're more than the distance to the moon, I'm not that interested.
That makes sense, dude. Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right, so the only ones I've been looking at since you brought my attention to this are the ones that are inside the moon.
Okay.
And I've been studying this for the last 6 months, since the night you brought it up. Okay, since the night you introduced it, basically you introduced Atlas, which, interesting, is called C-19 Atlas, by the way.
The former Northcom commander, General O'Shaughnessy, appeared on MSNBC's Morning Joe program to talk to Mika about the continuity of government and how they're braced inside their bases, and this is all supposedly over COVID. Meanwhile,
the sheer number of NEOs is staggering. I mean, it's historic.
It's like they're fine. You know, they don't even know some of these are there until they're already passing, right? I mean, in a couple days before, they're just flying right by all the time.
Right, well, that's the big problem, right? The big problem is we don't really get any advance notice. We find out about them as they pass, so to speak.
Yeah.
A day or in the case of the one that just passed us, as we're recording this, there was one called 2020 SW that just went by September the 24th, and that passed inside the geosynchronous orbits of the satellites.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this article a day or two ago, but they just moved the space station.
Really? Yeah. Like almost like they're taking evasive action or something?
Yeah, exactly. They blamed it on space junk. They said, oh, yeah, there's some space junk coming our way now.
If you look back to late March, early April, I was seeing all of this military movement inside the continental U.S. and I was watching all these rubber-tracked vehicles being shipped around, just trainloads and trainloads and trainloads of equipment being shipped around the U.S. Do you remember 20 years ago or more, Al Gore started talking about the environment, global warming? Well, they started talking about this because all the planets started warming up. And it wasn't because of what man was doing. Man's pretty little on the big scheme of things. Like when you're talking about a planetary, a whole planet and the ecosystem, man can't do much. But a perturber moving into the system, giant magnets opposing each other, can do something like that. So
I read an article that says that the ISS, the space station,
yeah,
it's not fit for human occupation. There's too much debris up there, and again, you got to remember the debris in space goes whizzing by like faster than bullets.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's like traveling at over 20,000 miles an hour, maybe, or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so something like that, even a grain of sand, something the size of a grain of sand going at those kind of velocities can be devastating.
Right.
So I don't know if they're going to move this thing into a different orbit or abandon it or what they're going to do. But they just moved it within the last 48 hours, and that's within 48 hours of this 2020 SW passing by. So I don't know if it was just a coincidence and it really was space debris, or if they were concerned that they were in the trajectory of the thing. So I don't know the answer, but I'm looking at the chart right now as I'm talking to you. I've got it pulled up on my machine, looking at all of these NEOs in September and August, and going back to the beginning of the year when you called our attention to it. And that's when it all kind of came together for me as to this might be the rationale, this might be the reason behind this global cover-up.
So when I went to meet with Angry Catfish Briggs in Colorado, it was a great experience. But more importantly, he got to show me everything that he's been working on, and it actually dovetailed, it blew my mind, it dovetailed with everything that I've been working on over the last decade or so. So this is absolutely a win-win when it comes to learning about some of this stuff, tracking it, tracking what's going on, and how space weather is affecting the planet and other planets.
Hi, my name is Eric Briggs. My channel on YouTube is Angry Catfish Briggs and Catfish's Corner. It's fairly simple. We're children of creation, and we have to own up to what we are. There's nobody coming to save us. Our salvation lies within our heart, not our bloodline. It's the frequency that you're emitting out of here. You can't fake it. You can fake words. You can fake anything coming out of your head. Your head can fool you. But your heart is pure intent. And that is what our Creator understands, the frequency. Because you can't fake that. And His first creation speaks that language. And we used to. FEMA is running the nation by proclamation of the President. He signed the Emergency Act. Congress didn't even mention anything about it. They had 6 months from the point he signed it. They couldn't even revisit the act. And that time's passed, and they're still not mentioning it, and we're moving into wave 2. I've been warning. They needed to take the supply chain into their hands. We're short on food. Our crops have for the last few years been progressively getting worse and worse at harvest. And I did the numbers and came up with the second week of April. Said they have to have us in lockdown. I didn't have any idea how they were going to get the American people off the couch. It turns out they didn't need to. What really impressed me, though, was 180 nations actually went under this lockdown. For a virus that's been proven to have less of a death rate than the typical flu. So I'm monitoring ISWA. It's GOES satellites on a NASA site. Start noticing tickles coming from behind on the magnetosphere, and it just gradually got worse and worse and worse and more noticeable, and more people are starting to come around and look and ask questions about what's going on the magnetosphere, because we're starting to see CMEs come from behind the planet, which is a sun-side event. A lot of the misinformation people are talking about how the magnet is weakening, but we're seeing closed field lines. And when a magnet closes its field line, that's a very strong action right there. The problem is, a lot of people don't understand magnetism. It's just like anything else. When you go from brain to brawn, you hunker down and fist up, and that's just what a magnet does. She like any other electron magnet, she's drawing in from her actual bow shock in and around and through into the equator and pushing out these field lines.
Something's going on because due to COVID, right? COVID-19, they've got all of these Earth-based telescopes shut down. They now said the Arecibo had an accident at it. The cable snapped magically.
The bow shock is where the solar wind meets our magnetosphere, and they call it the magnetopause or the bow shock. And that is where an immense amount of energy is. And we kind of look like a comet going through space, basically. These are things they just don't tell you in high school.
The funny thing is, the cable looks melted. It looks superheated and stretched. Was someone up there with a torch? Did they hit it with a laser? I don't know, but this telescope was tracking a near-Earth object, and it goes back to the White House mitigation plan. The White House has a whole near-Earth object mitigation plan that they're prepared to use.
So what she's doing is actually inducing energy from the bow shock through the atmosphere, through us, through the planet, and out the back in highly charged field lines, which is closing and pushing against another magnet.
They've met with various countries, and they're worried about planetary defense. It all started when, thousands of asteroids used to pass us a year. They would track all these asteroids. Well, there's been a massive uptick recently, and they don't know why Jupiter's not holding the asteroid belt back from us anymore. But it seems to me like something's now pushing these objects into us. This could be dangerous.
In physics, there's only one reason for a magnet to close its field line. That's if it's pushing another magnet away. They usually hang out like this. And with the solar wind, it looks something like that. And the Schumann frequency everybody talks about. It's a trapped frequency. And it bounces between the magnetosphere relaxed magnet lines and the ionosphere at 7.83 hertz. That's subsequently the exact same frequency your alpha wave is in your brain. Well, when she starts pushing, all of a sudden the Schumann frequency escapes. And according to Professor Schumann's research, the lack of Schumann frequency causes dizziness, ringing in the ears, seasick feelings, panic, into agitation, and madness. So everybody's worried about Yellowstone, but what about the Long Valley caldera? It can't stop shaking. The magma pool is almost twice as big as Yellowstone. It's much more liquid and more primed to blow. We've got fires starting in creek beds and mammoth lakes that are pretty unexplained. We've got people pulling dews out of their pocket when there isn't any dew needed. We went over mothers pulling in induction, and that causes induction heating. That's a forge. Of course the metals are heating, and the mantle's heating, and the magma's coming up. And ever since then, it's been putting off more and more and more quakes, and steady up to the 3.5s and in Long Valley. And I start thinking to myself, well, if they evacuated Los Angeles and the surrounding areas all the way up into Fresno, how many millions of people would live? That would skew their numbers, wouldn't it? So no wonder they've got everybody looking at Yellowstone. If I was you, I'd get out of Los Angeles and Fresno and the LA basin. It goes all the way through Bakersfield into Nevada. All these volcanoes are shaking. It's not a plate action that we're watching. There's rise in this caldera, and now all of a sudden everybody's really quiet about it. But you see the infrastructure set up back east. You don't see any infrastructure set up here. They're expecting us to go back east.
I think there's something going on that somebody, not necessarily the U.S. government, but somebody is extremely powerful, far more than the U.S. government. Somebody who's extremely powerful is causing the fires to happen to chase the people out of California. And so I don't know what's coming. I don't know who's doing it, but I am totally confident whoever is doing it is not the U.S. government, but somebody far, far more powerful than the U.S. government. Somebody who's controlling the earth and human civilization. And I've got an idea about who it might be, but I think it's a very, very dark and mysterious story. And I could tell you some stories that you're not going to want to hear. I could tell you some of the stuff that's happening right now. But California is just, it seems to be the first area that's hit by something that's coming to the United States. And we have enemies, and we have been sleeping while our enemies are working hard. And they're doing everything they can to destroy our country, our culture, our jobs, our money, our home, and everything we think we own. In point of fact, we own nothing.
California and Washington and Idaho, they're saying that these quakes in Idaho aren't on volcanic regions, but if you look at them, they are. They're in the volcanic fields. And it's all from the induction heating, from her bringing in all that energy from the bow shock to close all these field magnets in the back. It requires extra electricity. And that's just the simple physics of a magnet. Expect your bigger quakes to happen. And they've been ramping up gradually. Well, they're going to start ramping up a lot more swiftly here. We're going to jump from, we're having multiple 5s a day. I mean, you can close your eyes, throw a dart at the map, and hit a 5.0 quake. And it wasn't like that a couple of years ago. People were laughing at me a couple of years ago when I was telling them this was going to happen. Well, I'm going to tell you now the same thing I was telling people then. We're going to graduate to multiple 6s a day a lot quicker than we did the 5s. And then the 7s will roll in. And we're going to start seeing volcanic activity. Well, we're already seeing volcanic activity, if you ask me. Things. I mean, the Mercy just docked in Portland. That's a little bit of a red flag right there, that they're expecting exactly what I expect they're expecting, the Long Valley caldera to blow. They're expecting a mass exodus. They're expecting mass casualties. They're expecting inhalation injuries. Why do you think they've been pushing these masks? For flu with one of the least death rates flu's ever hit us with? No, they're expecting a natural disaster, and they're just not telling you about it. That's what they're expecting. The field hospitals back east, they've got the military guard dogs running around in New York City, making sure people are 6 foot apart, just so you're getting scared and you're distracted. If you're just scared and distracted, you're never going to guess as to what's really going on. And they've gotten really good at distracting us with grassy knolls.
Well, meeting with Marshall Masters was a great experience. He was exactly like I thought he would be. He's appeared on my radio show many times, and we were friends right away. We hit it off right away, but meeting him in person was a very different experience, and he's very passionate about what he does. So, you know, we met up, we talked about everything, and then we were going to go ahead and record the film shoot, and we got into it and we just went right to work. He said I exhausted him basically because of you know, how much energy I put into the film shoot and stuff. But the fact of the matter is he came up with some really fascinating information, and what he talked about in his interview might blow your mind. I mean, he's literally sitting there showing me images of this planet. They're cleaned with forensic law enforcement software. Planet X News, by the way, Scott Sion does a great job at this, cleaning up and forensically looking at some of these images that NASA has, and you can clearly see that there's objects out there that NASA is trying to cover up. And we went over this a few months back. They were shutting off telescopes. And does that make any sense? At a height of when we're supposed to be tracking these near-Earth objects, they're coming at a rate that they've never came in before.
Hi, I'm Marshall Masters, and Planet X is my thing. Is there a connection between Planet X and COVID? Yes, absolutely. COVID is what the government is using to set up everything in preparation. The lockdowns, the isolation. Why is it we need so many ventilators? I'll tell you why. When we're passing through the Nemesis dust cloud, we're going to be choking on dust. Coronavirus is the perfect cover for Planet X. It's the isolation, it's government control, and why so many ventilators? Why do we need all these ventilators? It's because there's a vast iron oxide dust cloud around Nash Kashmar, and we're going to be passing through it, and when we do, those who have lung problems, cardiovascular problems, they're going to need those ventilators. And I can tell you one thing, surgical masks are not going to do the job. And so we're being prepared. That's what coronavirus is all about, in my opinion. If you really want to find a smoking gun for this, look for the hospital ships. Where is Trump putting the hospital ships? And they serve multiple roles, not only as hospitals, but also for transporting prisoners. And everything I see right now, Shep, with this coronavirus it's a contrived cover story. It's nonsense. Until you understand it has a purpose, and then you understand it is anything but nonsense. And it makes us all a part of what is going on. You put on a mask, you are part of the Planet X preparation.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Oh, damn, that's good. I wonder how it would be with vanilla Coke.
Oh, it's good. It's real good.
Oh, I was gonna get the vanilla. All right. Now, I've written a couple of books. One of them is called The Return of Planet X. 8 years writing and researching and documenting this book. This was a real work of love of art, but a painstaking trip through records and libraries, and I've got about 4,500 personal books in my library, so I can assure you that I had a lot of research that went into writing this first book. This book was the second book published, but the first book that got the public's attention. So I had the second published book on the subject of Planet X, which is not a planet. It is a brown dwarf star. In the back. There you go. There are more Planet X myths than there are truths. I think that I have one of the truths. Planet X was announced by NASA in 1983 as something that was discovered by the Navy's IRIS telescope that was specially designed as an infrared telescope satellite looking for this brown dwarf star body that was rumored was incoming, which was then discovered and announced by NASA and seconded in a year later in U.S. World and News Report, when it then confirmed the whole story, told it all over again about how they discovered this smoldering incoming thing, and they called it Planet X. Now, Planet X is not a planet, it's a brown dwarf star. And I believe that it was part of a tri-star system that was originally designed for this particular solar system. I believe we have a giant blue-black, they call it an anchor star. It's about 1 million miles directly away from the center of the galaxy. This blue-black giant, and it controls our sun, just like the sun controls everything we do. It's a very complicated thing I'm trying to explain to you, but just bear with me.
I'm expecting, because the Native Americans spoke of dancing with the blue kachina, which is the blue sun. I've already spoke with them about it, and they concur. The blue kachina's next step is going to reveal himself. And I give that probably by the end of October, we'll understand that we're surrounded by planets and suns. What does that mean for the individual? Well, I hope the individual somehow gets this message that we're actually created for this time, because it's not a time to be afraid.
So, now that we know the nuances, what's it going to look like? Well, imagine this is Earth moving in its orbit. And Nemesis is coming up, and it's going to go past its point of perihelion, and it's going to then pass over our orbit. When it's directly above our orbit, we'll be looking up like this. And what will we see? It will be beautiful. It will be stunning. Because Nemesis will be lit by the light of our own sun. The problem is, beauty precedes the beast. Once we're going, ooh and ah, what comes next is death and dying.
If any of this comes to pass, it could affect the election. I'm not sure if they could legally postpone it. I'm not sure all the implications of what would happen if some kind of a national emergency is declared and the election is suspended. Now, whether or not this could actually happen, I don't know. All I can tell you is that there's going to be a huge upwelling of public emotion and a lot of negativity against this.
If this truly is a brown dwarf star system or something like that moving in, you're not going to basically see it until it's right on top of us. These things are so dark that they basically collect light nearly like a black hole. And what happens is the light just gets soaked up into it. So that's why special space-based infrared telescopes have to be used. But right now, something's going on because due to COVID, right? COVID-19, they've got all of these Earth-based telescopes shut down. They now said the Arecibo had an accident at it. The cable snapped magically.
And to be honest, this really brings me to the question I get from everybody all the time. When are we going to see it? It's really, it's an impossible question to answer because we're going to see it for many years. I estimate anywhere from 8 to 10 years for this entire transit to occur once Nemesis has crossed our orbit and is going to pass between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. Now, after that, what do we see? We're not going to see that much because we'll be passing through the iron oxide dust cloud with debris. We're going to have tremendous number of meteorite showers and storms. Go read your Bible, the plagues of Exodus.
Every 3,600 years, there's an object that comes whirling through in a long, narrow, elliptical orbit. Real narrow. Imagine if you had a large rubber band and you plucked that rubber band and you just stretched it, okay? You get a long, narrow, elliptical pattern out of the rubber band. That is exactly what the orbit of this extrasolar object is. Originally, our solar system had 3 stars. It had the mother star, Sol, that we see every morning when we wake up and say, good morning. And then we had the little baby sun. It was the size of Saturn, but 60 times its mass. Size of Saturn, 60 times its mass. It was damaged, it was injured when a huge coming planetary asteroid came zooming in through the plane of the ecliptic of our solar system, which was moving in a counterclockwise motion. This object came in at a clockwise motion and tore right through the entire plane of the ecliptic of the solar system. destroyed several of the outer planets. That's how Nibiru got kicked out. It destroyed Marduk. Marduk existed between Mars and Jupiter. And it was a large rocky planet, and that meteorite is from Marduk. Now, so what happened to the baby planet? Well, a big piece struck Mars, a deadly blow. Mars had there were approximately 3 planets that we knew had life. I started to speak about this earlier. Venus was the planet of plants and everything green that grows. Earth was created especially for animals, which ruled for hundreds of millions of years. Mankind's introduction to the planet is at best dubious, hard to explain, and sometimes only religiously explained, and sometimes not explained at all.
This goes back to the presidential level near-Earth, earthbound object preparedness bulletin, which came out at a White House level in June of 2018, and is what they said is, look, we got to have international working groups, we got to have these international bodies go around, we got to have people go around and tell internationally what's going to happen, because they started to see an uptick in these near-Earth, earthbound asteroids. There's things just whizzing by us left and right. A lot of times they don't even know until after they've passed. So where we were before seeing just thousands of objects pass us a year and our telescopes were detecting all this stuff, now they're seeing double that, maybe even more.
Since we're talking about Nibiru, it's only fair to say that debris fields that we've been suffering from could be the pitch and toe that this planet is pushing its own debris field, and as well as pulling one, which is what Planet X, Wormwood, did when the big asteroids started hitting us about 5 years ago. See, there's a whole cyclical thing that's going on here. Okay, now let's just assume I'm right, and it is Nibiru that everybody thinks is Planet X.
There was a convergence around April 26th, 27th, and 28th, and I called that convergence. I didn't say, look, there's going to be an asteroid convergence. I thought they were worried about one particular object. Well, apparently, after John Cullen got a hold of that information, he ran the simulations with the NASA JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory data, and what it showed is going back 500 years in history and going forward 500 years, nothing has happened like this in the modern era. And there really was a convergence of over 40 asteroids on that very day, which is concerning. And it explains why the government was why everyone was braced and bunkered down. They're talking about, we are in a live exercise. Look,
I didn't name it Planet X. NASA did, okay? I only took and did the research to tell you the story of where it came from, and that I think it's already come and gone, and that I think what we're experiencing right now is the after effects of Wormwood's leaving, the climactic craziness up and down. Remember, whatever affects the sun automatically, instantly, nearly instantly affects the Earth and all the other bodies in the solar system.
Shep, you and I have often talked about Yellowstone. And Yellowstone is a danger. But during its last eruption, it blew its cap. So when it blows again, it's going to be like a whole series of Mount St. Helens. And that's going to be bad enough. But what's the real nasty bad boy? Why do you want to get off the West Coast? Long Valley Caldera. It has not blown its cap. It's a single chamber. It's expanding, and it is not displacing. When Long Valley erupts from San Francisco down to San Diego and then over into Arizona, Phoenix, Flagstaff, Prescott, this area is going to be heavily blanketed in ejecta and ash. And I want to give everybody a very important suggestion. Please, please listen to what I'm going to tell you next.
It's the law of the universe. It's the law of the physics that create all of the dynamics that we enjoy on this planet. So when we have weather aberrations and all these storms, we can talk about the hurricane season this year. What in the hell do we think is going on here? It's all part of the same thing. When the sun is disturbed, it affects all of the weather systems on planet Earth.
From the time that COVID had started, that I learned about it in late December, I think it was toward the tail end of December and into January, I started basically going super hard in the paint, covering the whole COVID-19 thing. And I was wondering, what's going on in China? Is this going to cross the borders? And then I was doing trends analysis on, is this going to come to America, and what are they going to do in America? So I'm investigating COVID. I'm seeing that these lockdowns and stuff like that are going to come to America. I'm kind of noticing trends and whatnot. But then all of a sudden, right, I'm investigating COVID, and I find out that the Johns Hopkins Institute, not only do they control the COVID death map, if you will, the map that tracks all the COVID cases, the COVID case map. Not only does the Johns Hopkins Institute control that, but they are involved in NASA's Project DART. Now, NASA's Project DART actually controls the trajectory of near-Earth asteroids, John. This is the whole thing. Once I found that out, I started digging into whitehouse.gov plans and paperwork, and we're getting an emergency alert because we're in Louisville. We're getting an emergency alert because we're in Louisville, Kentucky right now, and the whole city is locked down under curfew. What are they doing with the closures? Why do they say there's clusters here, there's clusters there? I've been talking with doctors. These numbers are not real. This COVID map is not real. The numbers are not real. They are using this as a justification to lock down the populace. The Deagle report gets some very good information. It's its own intelligence agency. It also works with other governmental agencies. And the information that they have listed in their report is concerning, to say the least, because they say by 2024, about 2/3 of the U.S. population will be dwindled. Now, I'm talking depopulated by 2024. And the reason they are able to know this, it's not just a wild guess. They are expecting some kind of natural disaster. It's like, I found out in 2014 that we had contracts with Argentina, Brazil, and other countries worth hundreds of billions of dollars, okay? Hundreds of billions of dollars in contracts to house displaced U.S. citizens in case a natural disaster such as the Yellowstone supervolcano were to erupt. The U.S. could then have refugee camps and places for its citizenry to go and evacuate to. Notice they're burning people out of California. What are these fires doing? There's been people catching these, what looks like directed energy weapons, starting these fires. You got Antifa going around starting the fires. Whatever it is, these fires have been going on for a while, and a lot of the population has been pushed from the West Coast over into the country. Notice all the field hospitals were set up toward the eastern part of the country primarily. What are they going to do with 30,000 trauma surgeons? Trauma surgeons literally deal with impact wounds. I mean, really, think about it. How are trauma surgeons that deal with impact wounds going to treat people that have got COVID-19 or the coronavirus? How is that? How are they even trained to do that? So the next leg of our investigation took us to Houston, Texas, where we met up with Dr. Richard Urso, who's an outspoken doctor on the COVID. He's met with Vice President Mike Pence recently and sat rather close to him. And he has a lot of insight into what's been going on in the medical field with COVID, how he's been treating these patients and what he's found out, and what he told us absolutely blew my mind.
I'm Dr. Richard Urso. I'm a practicing ophthalmologist in Houston, Texas. I have a background in drug development and was able to design and patent and get through the FDA a drug for wound healing. Back in early February, I realized that this COVID-19 was going to affect the United States. And I started looking at some drug targets. And eventually, it didn't take too long to figure out that there was quite a few drug targets that made a lot of sense for this virus.
Another thing he talked about is how he's been successfully treating patients, but how the government and other people in the medical industry are speaking out and saying, look, you can't use this hydrochloroquine, you can't use this and that to treat people. Hydroxychloroquine, how do you say that shit?
Hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, ivermectin, phenylfibrate, colchicine, eventually other drugs, azithromycin, doxycycline, budesonide. There's quite a number of drugs that seem like they could be effective against this virus.
Is it hydrochloric, and then there's hydroxychloroquine? It's two things?
I think it's hydroxychloroquine. That's.
And when I started talking to others about it, I was immediately told to go home and isolate and stop wasting PPE. I thought that was very strange. I'd never been told that before. I've been through plenty of pandemics. I was through the AIDS epidemic. It was a really scary time. Patients were dying within, hundreds of patients were dying in front of our eyes within months. And it was certainly a scary thing because we didn't understand how the virus worked. And I've been through that, and this was more of the same like that. We didn't understand how the virus works, supposedly. Then I realized that it was actually a coronavirus, possibly manipulated in the lab, perhaps not. But clearly it was 80% of the other of quite a few other coronaviruses. So I thought, this has to be very similar in some ways to the other coronaviruses. This is why I came up with the drug targets. And when I was told to go home, I basically decided that wasn't going to work. I wrote letters. I was again told really strongly to stop exploring this. And I said, I don't understand this. We've never done this before. We've never told doctors to go home. We've never told patients to go home and isolate and wait till you're almost half dead before you come to the hospital. It made no sense. And I basically decided to go on social media and say that this was wrong, that we had drugs that looked like they were great targets for this virus, and I felt like we had to let the world know. So I put out a video. It got about 100,000 views in about 2 hours, and I thought, wow, that's really taken off. And sure enough, within a short period of time, 2 days later, I got a letter from the board telling me that I was in trouble for talking about hydroxychloroquine and how it works.
The doctor actually thinks this COVID case map is inaccurate. He doesn't know how they're getting their information. He doesn't know what's going on.
So what's interesting, the Hopkins guys, they first started their analysis based on news reports. All of a sudden now they've got this artificial intelligence uploading data from who knows where. I don't know where they're uploading data from. Where's the paper trail? Where's the IRB approvals? The de-identified data from where? From what hospitals? Where's the ethics reviews? Where's the IRB? Where's all the things that go along with getting data from hospitals on patient HIPAA compliance? All that stuff has to be. It's a huge paper trail, and it's really hard to institute it. So I don't know where I don't believe their data any more than Surgisphere, and I'm gonna go there for a second. Harvard, as anybody on this film has heard of, actually had a completely fake data set that they did for the New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet, and it's two cardiovascular guys that published the data. They created a data collection called Surgisphere, which is basically completely fabricated everything. 93,000 patients, 671 hospitals, 6 continents. And it turned out that we basically said there's no way they can do that. There's no way. And I feel the same way with what's going on with Hopkins. There's no transparency. There's no way they can collect all this data in real time. Nobody uploads their data. That's not how hospitals work. It's not like we have one system. You know, we're all on iPhone systems, or we're all on Microsoft Word. No, it's not how hospitals are. My own hospital system the billing doesn't talk to the clinical. So it's really hard to get data to talk. Every system's different. There's no way they can collect all this data without huge paper trail and only 6 people. No, it's impossible.
So one of the coolest things about Dr. Richard Urso is that he's basically an anti-masker. He was telling me, look, these masks literally do not even work. You know, he's been on my radio show before, but these masks, people are touching them. They're touching their face. It's like what President Trump was talking about with the food service people. I mean, what are these masks really going to protect from? The virus itself is so small, it just goes right through the holes in the mask. I mean, it would be like a chain link fence, and you're just putting grapes through the links in the chain link fence. This is the virus going through the pores in the mask. So what's the point?
One of the interesting things about masks are that as a doctor, I always think that we should give patients something to do, knowing that maybe it does no harm, maybe. So when we talk about masks, do masks work? The short answer is no, they don't work. They've been studied significantly. Every area of industry has something they do with masks. The oil and gas industry has something they do with masks, and people study this. They've been studying it for years. Medical industry, same thing. And what we've learned from all these studies, and I personally looked at 128 studies now. I've got a list of about over 200 of them.
And you got all these people walking around. Really, these masks can actually make you sicker than you might get without even wearing them. Not to mention they weaken your immune system and on and on.
And basically what we find is that these masks that we're using, cloth masks, surgical masks, and N95, they're not designed to stop viruses. Even N95, it's N for non-oil resistant. The size of the pores is smaller than the COVID virus. COVID's a lipid capsule, so hello, slips right through. And of course it doesn't stick to water like they were trying to say. So in all the studies, though, I think the studies show everything you need to see. You can think it through, but at the end of the day, the studies show it doesn't help in healthcare workers, and it doesn't help in community setting. So at the end of the day, it's like putting a blanket on at night and hoping the boogeyman doesn't attack you. It doesn't work. So once they started having people thrown off the airplanes, 1.5-year-old, I had kids from college that told me they had to wear the mask on Zoom calls. It's insane. It's insanity. I saw old ladies getting beat up for not wearing a mask. The mask police are out, and it's time. You know, let's take the blinders off. They don't work. Sorry. I hope it doesn't hurt your feelings.
For those of you who live in California, I'm sorry. You're in the wrong place. If you're anywhere along the western coastline, or any other coastline for that matter. And so for this reason, I have begun moving east to an undisclosed location. Now, for those of you who are staying where you're staying, what are you going to see? It's going to be hard to see things. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of dust from the Nemesis system, but also dust from impact events here on Earth, volcanic eruptions, essentially a nuclear winter of sorts. It's going to be a dark and foreboding time. But when Nemesis completes its transit from the ecliptic on one side of the sun to the ecliptic on the other side of the sun, this is when dying time is near.
National Guard deployed, they said they were deploying 30,000 trauma surgeons. Any ideas like why that would happen, why they did that?
That's an interesting question. You know, actually, in COVID-19, this pandemic, there would be no reason to really deploy 30,000 trauma surgeons. So, in some sense, I have to say that I find that unusual. That thousands of hospitalists, thousands of intensive care people makes sense. The trauma surgeons really doesn't make any sense. I'm not quite sure how to put my thoughts around that.
Johns Hopkins Institute controls not only the COVID case map, but they control, they're in this program with NASA. Basically, they can change the trajectory of earthbound asteroids. And then I go into whitehouse.gov and I find these plans. They got crazy presidential level mitigation plans, and it says in June of 2018 the White House recommended, and they went ahead and they got a hold of international working groups and other countries, and they said, look, we're worried about these earthbound objects, and this is a threat, and these things are ramping up. And they started going around building this plan, and then I see a military deployment, a military rollout, the bunkering down in Washington. They sent a joint special security task force into Washington, D.C.
What will be the greatest, the most terrible horror? It will be the pole shift. Our planet has had pole shifts in the past. The geology tells us that much. And they do not occur over thousands of years, but rather very quickly. You see, the pole shift is going to be the last farewell, if you will, of the Nemesis system as it crosses the ecliptic back into the southern skies.
I saw this military deployment. I was trying to get this across to you guys. I'm saying, look, they're rolling this out. And my investigation all of a sudden went from, I'm tracking COVID, now I'm tracking near-Earth asteroids and what's going on, possibly a future disaster. I'm getting whistleblowers calling into my show. They're out of the Department of the Interior, other government agencies, but one whistleblower in particular, her name is Becca, had called in, and she's saying, look, they might be shutting down the inner workings of the government. They're just all on standby. They're enacting these alert systems, and something is not right. The government is genuinely scared. I have people telling me their paychecks are coming from FEMA. You call the White House and only FEMA answers. I don't know what's going on, but it feels like we're in full-on continuity of government, which has been admitted, but they're not going to lift it, and they're worried about something.
People ask me about Ed Dames and his remote viewing, and he talks about something called the kill shot. And they call him Dr. Doom and so forth. And I've met Ed, and actually I've taken one of his RV classes, and I will tell you, it's a very useful survival skill. It's well worth your time and your money. Learn RV. He talks about the kill shot. And what really does that mean? He's talking about what we call a solar sprite or cosmic lightning. Think about the Grand Canyon. We're told the Grand Canyon was created by water erosion. Frankly, I've flown through the Grand Canyon, and that just doesn't cut it for me. But let's use a better example. Val Marineris on Mars, the largest such canyon system in our solar system. That is what happens when cosmic lightning from the sun strikes a planet. Ed Dames is right. We're going to have a solar sprite, cosmic lightning. Just pray to God you're not on the daylight side of the planet when it strikes. And better yet, pray that you're in the other hemisphere as well, because that will be one of the most deadliest loss of life events leading up to the eventual pole shift.
So we're in a time where there's some great and terrible things going to happen. And how many terrible things depends on us. And we've got to stop doing these things to each other. We're on a beautiful blue living planet. And we've got one. We're her children. And we need to stop fighting each other. We need to come together in love. And it doesn't matter what color you are, what religion you are. We need to drop that. We're all one family. It's the mother, the father, and the child of creation. It's the mother, father, child of any animal, anything in creation. I don't know anything that isn't compiled of a mother, a father, and a child. The true Trinity.
We made it!
Yeah! What's up? What? Oh my god! Look at him! He's Jolly Green Giant and Little Sprout! Like, look at this! What's up, man?
Nothing.
Oh,
you don't got your COVID mask on.
Oh, well, social distance.
No.
Oh my god, what's going on?
Hello, this is
Yes.
Kermit the Frog.
Do it in Chinese. We'll use that one.
Yeah, this is Anthony Fauci for Crowdsource the Truth. Listen, wear a mask, go on Tinder, go to a Washington Nationals game. I can't throw, but maybe you can.
Get the glory holes.
One of the symptoms of COVID-19 is the inability to throw a baseball.
Remote viewing is?
Yeah.
I took a shot at remote viewing.
What'd you see?
It worked. And this is Samantha. And this is a real live shoot. And if we want to keep it in, it's fine with me. And there you go, Samantha.
Shepard Ambellis here, reporting for IntelliHub.com. I'm out.